And hey, gang, it's Jimmie, Arkansas First News, coming to you with facts, not fiction. A lot of talk, a law that got passed this session. Governor Sanders signed Act 955 that has to do with use of bathrooms in public facilities. A little more than that. It goes into, of course, changing rooms, living quarters, and things like that. But the big issue most people are talking about around the state on it is the issue of bathroom usage. I wrote two articles on it. One was an article talking about the law and explaining the law. The other was an opinion piece with my perspective on the law. And what I've been trying to do for quite some time is to get a different perspective from just mine. Okay. Obviously, I'm a conservative, strong conservative, and I have my perspective on it. So I reached out to Judson Scanlon, who North Little Rock lives in North Little Rock, been very involved in these issues for quite some time. And so I wanted to see if Scanlon would come on to give that perspective, and Scanlon has agreed to do that. So I'm going to let Scanlon tell you a little bit about herself and her perspective, and then we'll get into the law and we'll have a really fun discussion about it. So Scanlon, I really do appreciate you coming on. So tell the folks a little bit about yourself.
Jimmie, I love that you call me Scanlon.
Well,
My
that's what you asked me to call you, right?
I did. And I appreciate that very much. I appreciate the fact that you've invited me to come on and have this conversation. I don't get invitations like this very often, and I want to make sure that anytime I actually get the opportunity to have a conversation like this, that I take up on it because I feel like we are in the place that we're in our country because we just don't talk to each other. And more importantly, we don't listen to each other. So I want to make sure that we're actually dipping into the opportunity to listen and hear from the different perspectives of why things hit us in the way that we do. So I was raised in Northeast Arkansas. I'm an Arkansan, grew up here, went to University Heights Elementary School, graduated from Middleton High School, went on to Arkansas State, but felt like I wanted to get out of town as quick as I could because this the culture, the environment just was not conducive for me. It was not healthy for me. It was not a place where I felt safe. And so I left Arkansas. Now, and I said to myself, I was never coming back. And I ended up back here simply because a friend of mine asked me to do a project to encourage Senator Lincoln and Senator Pryor at the time to vote against the confirmation of Justice Alito to the Supreme Court. And I agreed to do that on a very limited basis. I only wanted to be here for a month. So I dropped in, I did the work, and on the second day I was here, I met the love of my life. And from that point forward, Arkansas again has been my home. And that was more than 20 years ago.
All right. Right now,
Um, and you're right to say that I'm a political, like I'm in the political world. I started working in politics professionally in the 90s on initiatives in Washington State, and then ended up working on 29 campaigns in 28 states, and served as Bernie Sanders' National Outreach Director for Gays and Lesbians when his 2016 presidential campaign. And since then, I've been working on political stuff. But that's just a little bit of my political life and personal. My wife and I live here. We raise our 14-year-old daughter, who is now will be attending Central High School next year.
you also have been pretty heavily involved in local politics too, if I'm not
Well, I ran
mistaken.
for office. Yeah, I
Sure.
did. I ran for the state house in District 70, which is North Little Rock and Gravel Ridge. Um, and I've worked on campaigns in Arkansas as well.
Well, that'd be great. Now, I want to make sure I get this right. And if I don't, you tell me, okay.
I will.
Do you consider yourself a transgender male? Is that correct?
So it's an interesting concept. Transgender itself is an identity. Now, the gender after that is kind of defined by the person, but I consider myself transgender, which means that my outward appearance does not equal my inward identity. Now, I'm also very firmly and very strongly believe that I will not medically transition. I will not have the surgeries that align my internal and external identities. Um, because at 62, it's just that piece is not as important to me personally, as just the knowledge and the identity that it is real, that my internal and external identities do not match.
As we get older, I'm 63. And
Yeah.
so as we get older, those priorities change on senses like that. But your internal identity, would you classify that as being male?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
I
And
am absolutely my internal identity. In my family for many generations, there has been evidence and realities of women in my family, much like me, who have held in an external feminine visual, but have been truly identified as male and having strong male personalities.
and that, yeah, and I wanted to talk about that because that's important to the discussion as it applies to the law. I think it's really important. I'm going to read the folks the title of the law,
Hmm.
okay? And this is government language. It's in which I can't stand, and that's one thing Scanlon and I both agree on. We don't like government too much in government language, and so an act concerning safety and privacy in certain entities concerning the designation of multi-occupancy restrooms, changing rooms, and sleeping quarters in certain entities based on an individual's sex and for other purposes. Now, what that boils down to is basically saying if you're a man, you got to use men's facilities. If you're a woman, you got to use women's facilities. That boils it down to that kind of language. That's a lot of garbage legal language to tell you something pretty simple, right?
Well,
And no, go
I,
ahead.
I I just want to say that it actually doesn't say it as that clearly. What it basically says is if the gender on your birth certificate is a female, you have to use the female restrooms. And if the gender on your birth certificate is, if the gender marker is male, like there's an M for male, then you have to use the male restroom. That's what the law says.
Well, we're going to get into, and actually, it's interesting because there's some definitions. This law actually defines male and female.
Right.
Okay, and whether you agree with the definition or not, this is what the law is voted in, uh, defines it as. And what I want to get into though is the intent. Now that's the title, but here's the intent because here's where it gets real interesting. Okay, this is
And
legislative
be sure and
intent.
read that piece that says this is not to be codified in law.
Well, in the intent, and I'll yes, and I'll explain that because that's a big deal with me on a lot of bills when they say do not codify. Okay, and because most intents are codified into law. But the legislative intent behind the act is it is the intent of the General Assembly to one, clarify and reconcile the meaning of sex, male and female in state law, and two, preserve order and dignity in women's restrooms, changing rooms, and sleeping quarters in facilities where women have traditionally been afforded privacy and safety. Now, for this discussion, as I told everybody, for this discussion, we're not going to talk about changing rooms or sleeping rooms. We're going to keep this discussion to bathroom usage because that seems to be the main topic around the state. Okay, now you can apply the theories to all of that, but for this discussion, we'll keep it to bathrooms. So,
Oh, oh,
Scanlon,
let's
what
actually, Jimmy, let's actually mention though that it's really about shelters too. Like what they're really trying to do
well,
is
prisons, shelters, yeah.
prison shelters, anywhere there's congregational
If
sleeping
it's
quarters.
if it's a state or municipal county, if it's a government building, it
Right,
applies. Okay, that
right.
applies to the
And
Arkansas Department of Corrections, women's shelters, anything that is government facilities.
It also applies to people who are using government funds to travel. So if you're traveling, it says you have to sleep same gender in sleeping
Yes,
rooms.
yes. And but like I say, for this discussion, we're going to kind of stay on the bathroom
We'll
end of
stick
it.
to the bathrooms.
Yeah, because that seems to be the main topic around the state. So okay, I read the intent. You read it, Scanlon. So I want to get your. I've got some thoughts on the intent, but I want to get your thoughts on the intent. There's two parts to it, so give me your thoughts on those.
So I I really hate thinking ill will of people that are trying to, in their best language or in their best intention, try to quote unquote keep the peace, right? I think the challenge comes with kind of basic ignorance. I appreciate that they want to keep women safe and that they feel like that there's this statement about our inability to take care of ourselves. But I think unless you've experienced the humiliation of somebody tapping you on your shoulders and telling you that you're in the wrong line because your hair is too short, and you have to prove to that woman or that person that's tapping you on the shoulder when you're trying to enter into the bathroom that you're just simply trying to use the bathroom that you're supposed to be using. It's really embarrassing. And I don't think elected officials are taking into consideration the post and pre transition periods that transgender people actually go through, or the the or looking at scientific data that tells us when women are in danger. Women are historically and proven across the board not in danger from transgender people. And I think that while the state has listed that as their intent, I suspect that what they're truly trying to do is put in writing kind of a fail safe so that they can fall back and they say, well, our intent was to do this. I'm sorry that it didn't work out that way.
Well, the what's interesting about this all, because this is going to be a little bit of my take on it, okay? Because let's call it what it is. Okay, this bill was presented as not a transgender bill, but a bill to keep basically keep men out of women's restrooms in the hopes, like say, I'm looking at it to protect women and so on. Okay, okay, I get that because we are in a situation now because of the way the world is. You can, a man can say, well, I feel like a woman, so I'm going in that bathroom when he clearly doesn't feel like a woman. To use that as an excuse. Okay, that's such a rarity. And
And
so I feel like that
people
this,
don't need that excuse.
well, I don't feel like, I, I don't feel like Representative Bentley and Blake Johnson or Johnson, who I'll say are not conservatives. They call themselves conservatives, but they're not. They're not true Republicans. This uh, this is a transgender bill. To me, any way you cut it. Now, some people may disagree. To me, it's a bill about transgenderism. It's not about this or that, which they don't even talk about transgenders in the bill, really. Okay, but that's to me,
Well,
that's what it's about.
why
Is
do you
to
think? Here's a question then, Jimmie. Then why, if that is the case, and we know that it's in like it's a very popular thing, bashing transgender people is a very popular sport. So why would they deny that it's a bill intent to define gender for transgender? Why wouldn't they
hey,
grab that?
I think that instead of owning it, see, I would own it. Okay.
We know that.
Right. I mean, I would own it. Instead of doing that, they kind of take what I call a coward's way out. And they say, well, we did the, but we're not talking about transgender. Well, the hell you're not. Okay. And, just say it though. Just grow a set and say it and deal with it. And, but they're not doing that. And, when it says preserve the order and dignity in women's restroom and change room, okay, I'm all about that. I'm all about that. Because you talked about situations where you've been embarrassed, somebody tap you on the shoulder. Totally get that. Totally get that. But there's another end of this too about, women who are in a restroom and they're uncomfortable with a man being in there with them and the embarrassment that those women feel as well.
So
So there's kind of
that's kind of
there's
a
kind of
different
two sides to that.
that is two sides, but you're starting at a premise that the transgender person that's standing beside them is a man, when in fact they're doing everything that they can to match their outward appearance with their inward identity. And they don't identify as a man. The person that we would assume would feel uncomfortable um, may be uncomfortable with the knowledge that they don't know about transitioning. They don't know about, like, they've never encountered that information, that reality before. So they're uncomfortable with that as much as they are uncomfortable with the person. But
Oh,
there's
and there's people that do understand and have read and have looked into it. And
sure,
it doesn't change the fact that they're still embarrassed and uncomfortable with it. So, I mean, that's it, it works both ways, is what I'm saying. And I think when we finish up, there's a solution to this that I bet you and I are going to agree on. Uh,
how
okay.
about we just have
It
bathrooms?
so it
It's worked to now.
it but yeah, so the intent, uh that's the big part of the intent, I think, is they're not being honest about it. I would just be honest about it. Okay.
That's what it
And that
sounds like to me. Like you have real issues with the fact that they are not honest on their
I
intent.
do. I have issues with anybody that's not being honest. That's
Yeah,
an elected official. You know,
I
I
get
don't
that.
have to. I don't have to agree with me, but damn, just be honest.
I've worked with some real stinkers myself, so I get it.
So, and to clarify that, in the first thing in it is to clarify and reconcile the meaning of sex, male and female in state law. So we're going to talk about that. Um, uh, as far as the definition of it. And matter of fact, I'm going to read you those definitions. I know you read them,
I
but I'm
can't
going to
wait.
read
I
you.
know I've read them too, and I can't. Well, let's talk. Let's have this discussion.
And uh, again, this is legal jargon. Legalese is what they call it,
Yeah.
right? All right. Female means an individual who naturally has, had, will have, or would have, but for a congenital anomaly or intentional or unintentional disruption to the reproductive system that at some point produces, transports, and utilizes eggs for fertilization. Okay, stay with me, guys,
I-
because now I'm going to give you the male definition. Okay.
That's a bunch of legal jumbo
And
mumbo.
so male means an individual who naturally has, had, will have, or would have, but for a congenital anomaly or intentional or unintentional disruption of the reproductive system that at some point produces, transports, and utilizes sperm for fertilization. Now, I'm going to tell everybody that the Bureau of Legislative Research, which is full of attorneys, came up with that language. Okay, so when a senator or representative brings a bill, they take it to BLR, Bureau of Legislative Research, and they say, okay, here's what we want to do. How can we do this legally? Da 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 da. So there's the reason that language is you feel like you got to go to Oxford to even understand it, is because of something you and I briefly talked about the other day, and that is far as intersex, right?
Hmm.
Okay, and the reason that language is like that, I believe, is to cover those individuals. Is that the way you read the language?
I don't know how they could be because, as someone who is born intersex is somebody who possesses both gender markers. They have both testes and they have ovaries. They
Mhm.
have both. I mean, they have and basically at most historically what's happened and through stories that have been told through many different arenas, including medical, it's the doctor and the parents who then determine the gender of the child. But who says they didn't choose wrong, right? I mean, you can either, if you are physically intersex and you hold both physical uh, embodiments, then who's to, you don't fit into these definitions. There's no way to fit into them because you're
Yeah,
born with both.
and I'm gonna tell you, I'm not smart enough. What I did do is I did some research, okay, and I'm no doctor or anything. But what the consensus on science says is a congenital anomaly, and intersex is considered a congenital anomaly, okay, medically and scientifically. So that's the reason I think they put that in the language where it specifically says would have but for a congenital anomaly.
So, what do you tell those people who are now considered anomalies? How are they to be defined?
Well, in I'm telling you what the law says and what they came up with. I'm not telling you
I
that
know.
I totally agree with that. I told you at one point, one of our discussions going into this, that I think when a person's of age and they are genuinely intersex, then I think that that should be up to them to determine, hey, I'm a male or female. I think it
Sure.
should be there. Now, I of course, then again, I didn't get to write the law, but that's the way Jimmie Cabin would approach it. Now we do need to point out, and because you've apparently done a lot of study on this, because you had said that you felt like a lot of people in your family may be intersex. I think, and if I'm
Well,
wrong,
let me
you
just
tell
put
me
it.
that.
There are a lot of stories I could tell, but one of the stories that we love passing down in our family is to tell the story about how my great grandmother was part of a shotgun wedding, um, and she was the one holding the shotgun. So, I mean, there have been stories on both on my mother's and my father's side of the family that have absolutely pointed to the fact these women farmers, these women were not had no need for men and were truly, to me, that is no, there's no better way to define that than to say they were potentially intersexed and that this is just an anomaly that happens in my DNA.
Well, especially I think with women that back in the day when you and I were young, they were called tomboys.
Oh,
And,
well,
and
and Jimmy, I was thinking about that too. I mean, I was literally, yes, I was a tomboy until
yeah,
I hit puberty. And then in puberty, when girls start developing girls and they start developing emotional crushes and they start like their emotions react. Mine never reacted like that.
yeah.
I still wanted to be the tomboy. I still wanted to do the things the boys did. So I spent a lot of my high school years in just cloistering myself for fear of somebody figuring out I was weird and wrong. And I spent a lot of time isolated and not interacting with people my age because of that.
Yeah, I'm a little different. To me, there's nothing cuter than a farm girl with her ball cap on backwards. And
Yeah, yeah. I didn't want you to think I was cute, Jimmy.
yeah, oh, I didn't say you wanted it, but that wouldn't stop me from thinking. Okay. But I do think we need to point out that intersex. Now, this is science talking. This is not Jimmy Cabin. I'm like I say, I'm not a doctor. What I did is I read and I researched. Okay,
I
and
appreciate that.
well, in but what I'm determining is you see a lot of difference though, but generally there's this deal with science and medical folks that'll go between 1% of the population to 0.018%
Yeah.
of the population is intersex. So I do think we can agree it's a real rarity, but in that instance, then again, my thought is if someone's of age and they go, look, I'm truly an intersex, then I think, hey, let them decide. Let them
Well,
decide.
this brings up a really great question then. And this is another chance to prove how smart I am. How many NCAA students are there? Like how many students, college age students are participating in NCAA sports?
Ooh, if you factor in Division II as well, yeah,
Just across the board,
yeah, astronomical figure.
500,000. They said they estimate 500 to 500,010 is the
Right.
number that the president of NCAA gave. And of that, they said they asked him to estimate how many of those 500,000 students would be considered a trans athlete, a transgender athlete. Do you know what the answer was?
No.
He said maybe 10.
Yeah.
GLAAD, a national organization that does work and supports education and gay and lesbian students, teachers going through the system, they have actually identified 50 transgender athletes
Mm.
in the NCAA. We have spent thousands upon thousands upon thousands upon thousands of hours and dollars trying to police 50 athletes and relegating them to less than human status and not allowed to participate in NCAA sports because they are transgender. Other teams don't want to participate against them. They've been
I'll
shunned.
tell you what we'll do. We'll do another show on that because that's an interesting topic in itself. Because we're going to disagree on that, as you might guess, but we'll do
Oh,
another show. We'll do another show on that one. But let me jump to what the law says, okay? Because we're going to get into the meat of the law. The law states every restroom, changing room, or sleeping quarter in a public building that is designated for the exclusive use of females or males shall only be used by a member of that designated sex. A person shall not enter a restroom or changing room that is designated for the exclusive use of females or males unless he or she is a member of the designated sex. Now, you read the law and I read the law. You already know my feelings on it, which I'll tell everybody. But based off what I just read you, how effective do you see this law in accomplishing that? Now, I'm not saying you agree with what it says, but
no,
how
no, no. No,
effective?
I'm not even thinking about this. I don't think it accomplishes I think it accomplishes the exact opposite of what it actually is attempting to accomplish.
Okay.
And I think the danger that lies in that law is not just on who it's targeting, but also on the misinformation in the public. And the way I can the best way I can use the example of that is if you are saying that somebody who was born with ovaries has to use the women's bathroom, regardless of whether or not they possess those ovaries, then do me a favor and do a quick search and put in transgender man and show me that picture because that is who will be using the women's restrooms because that's what the law says. Now, when you or I see somebody with facial hair entering the women's bathroom, we're going to assume the worst. And we're going to assume that that person with the full beard and mustache is in fact going into the women's restroom to do harm. And we will act on that. And I think that is the problem when in fact that person that's being forced to use that restroom is going to the restroom they're supposed to. What you'll find and what my life experience shows me is that I just choose not to use the restroom in public places because I do not want to be party to the accusations that follow as to whether or not I'm using the appropriate restroom. Now it's
Sure.
easy for me because I'm not changing my outward appearance. I still have the tools necessary to use the women's restroom. But but I know plenty of people who are very masculine in appearance and would not feel comfortable being forced to use the women's restroom, and nor should they.
And I'm glad you talked about that because I'm going to come back to that in a little bit because I've actually got some examples in my feelings on that. But the problem I have with this law, with what I just read, is here's where the problem comes in for me. I'm going to read the remedy of the law. So let's say Jimmie Kevin goes into the women's restroom at the state capitol. Okay.
Mhm.
And so I'm violating the law, right? All right. Well, here's the remedy on the law. This is where I got a big
My
problem.
cause of action.
Yeah, this is where I got a really big problem with this. A person in a restroom or changing room designated for use by his or her sex who encounters a person of the opposite sex has a private cause of action for damages. If the governmental entity is a political subdivision of the state and declaratory and injunctive relief against the government entity occupying a public building in which the restroom or changing room is located, if the governmental entity, one, provided the person of the opposite sex permission to use a restroom or changing room of the opposite sex, or two, failed to take reasonable steps to prohibit the person of the opposite sex from using the restroom or changing room of the opposite sex. Now, here's what I'm going to tell you as a conservative, I got a problem with this, okay? So they're telling me, hey, we're going to make a law, makes it illegal for a man to go in a woman's restroom and a woman to go into a man's restroom, okay? All right, and so I'm going to use my sister as an example. I call my sister Kat, okay? If Kat's at the state capitol and she goes into the women's restroom and a man follows her in there, okay, she has to bring that issue. She has to go hire, if it's that to remedy, she has to hire an attorney, which is going to be a minimum 10 grand, a minimum 10 grand on a case like this. Then she has to file a lawsuit against the Secretary of State. Then she has to go to court and she has to prove that the Secretary of State failed to take reasonable steps to keep that man out of there. Okay, which is a sign accomplishes that, right? Sign, hey, no mental out. That's a reasonable step. And so let's say she even proves that, which is highly unlikely because it's too high a bar. It's too high a bar. But let's say she does, and she wins that lawsuit. Okay, nothing's going to happen to the Secretary of State. The judge is going to issue an order that he violated the law. And he's going to say, we're going to enjoin you from doing that again, which is basically an injunction saying, hey, don't let it happen again. So nothing happens to the Secretary of State. Okay. My sister doesn't get any damages. All she can do is try to recoup her legal fees, but she has to go to the Arkansas Claims Commission to submit a claim to reimburse her legal fees. Well, the commission decides, so the attorney, she says, here, I got $10,000 in legal fees. Here are the itemized invoice my attorney provided me. Here's his charges that account for every 10th of an hour. And then they decide if that's reasonable. And they come back and say, no, you know what, we'll allow you $6 grand. So then my sister, not only was she out 10 grand to begin with, but she only gets to recoup $6 grand. That's not very much of a damn remedy for what the law is saying, right? So the man who goes in the women's restroom faces no penalty, faces nothing, no criminal charges, nothing. And so let me ask you this, Sarah. Based off that, do transgenders really have anything to fear from this damn law? Because it's really just a suggestion to them at that point, because if you go, not that you would, because you've already explained, but let's say you go into the men's restroom. Okay. What's going to happen to you? There's nothing in the law. So my contention is transgenders are worried about this bill that they're going to violate a law for no reason because there's no penalties to it. Am I making sense?
Jimmie, this kind of gets to the crux of the whole issue if you really want to know the reality of it. So I'm gonna get what you guys what I assume people would call really woke here. Okay. The issue with this bill is not necessarily just that it tries to and attempts to define gender in a way that restricts a person's knowledge, right? It's
Mhm.
also that it has brought attention to people who otherwise just want to live their life and don't want to be pointed at, don't want to be signaled out, do not want to be the subject to hate crimes, do not want to be, told that they are everything wrong with this world, don't want to be the subject of preachers across the state, don't want to be the subject of fundraising appeals for Jerry Cox and the religious conservatives at work. But that's exactly what happens. People that are transgender, people who are gay and lesbian, we have served as the fundraising fodder for religious organizations for the last 30 years. And that has been the reason that you see so much legislation pinpointing us. It's because we make great fundraising fuel. People write checks when they hear, like when we are centered in the fundraising appeals. And that's really the driving reason that transgender people have to continually watch our backs, that I don't have the comfort of identifying and being who I am, that my child has to be concerned when she's in public about what can happen to her families, about how, every day we learn one more thing that's wrong with us from the public's perspective. I live a life uh, of just, it takes courage to live in this world, given that so much is applied to us. We're called groomers, we're called pedophiles, we're called everything wrong with the world. That's the danger of these pieces of legislation, is that they continually center us and make us targets. It's not just what it does.
I'm gonna agree with you on a concept on this. Okay. Now, of course, maybe we're gonna differ. I'll just go ahead and say
Yeah,
it. If you're a man, you need to be in the men's facility. If you're a woman, you need to be in the men's
if you
facility.
look like a woman, you use the woman's restroom. If you look like a man, you use the man's
Well,
restroom.
and we're close on that, which I'm gonna come to that because I've got some examples for you. Okay. Uh, but where I have a problem as a conservative is when so-called conservatives bring a bill like this and they put no teeth in this
This
law.
doesn't hurt me.
No, it doesn't, and it doesn't accomplish what they said it accomplishes. It's smoke and mirrors. This law is basically, it's like, I think I told you this. It's like the display cake at the bakery. It's a cardboard box with icing on it. When you cut, it looks good, but when you cut into it, from a conservative perspective, there's no damn cake, right? And so that's the problem I have with it. And to your concept, and this is true, Mary Bentley, Blake Johnson, the RPA, they fundraise off you. They fundraise off you, Scanlon. And it's disingenuous because they're trying to fool me. They're trying to fool me. And so
They
basically,
got money telling you they're going to do all kinds of horrible things to me, and they didn't do the
and
horrible
and,
things.
and I'm not saying they want to do horrible things, but they're doing it. They're doing it in the sense that they're telling, okay, so every conservative goes, yeah, we love this bathroom bill, right? So what do? Okay, so the RPA and Representative Mary Bentley and Blake Johnson, they hold up in their left hand, hey, red meat, look at this. We're giving you a bathroom bill. Look here, conservatives. This is what you want to see me. I'm giving you this. I'm giving you this. And what they're giving you is a placebo. Okay. As far as a conservative is. Okay. What they're trying to give conservatives is a placebo. And over on this hand, while they got you watching this hand, thinking they're giving you what you want, over here, they're taking your freedoms away to get citizen initiated amendments. Over here, they're attacking for you. Over here, they're actually protecting out of state insurance companies and putting special interest over people.
You're
That's
starting to
not
sound like
conservative.
progressive, Jimmie.
But that's what, so I agree with you in a sense they're using you to get to me, but they're not fooling me because the
Well,
present they wrapped up in a bow, there ain't a damn thing in that box, right? And so no,
my
I get what
question,
you're saying.
I guess my question for you, Jimmy, is what do you want? Like, what is it they could give you that would actually,
As far as this law,
yeah.
okay, okay, yeah, no, that's an easy question for me. And we're in a minute we're going to talk about it because I said in the article, and if you read the article, you see, yeah, okay, is the issue simple? Well, yes and no. Okay, so, and we're going to get to that, but the simple end to it for me, and is look at the end of the day, do I believe that men should use the men's restroom and women should use the women's restroom? Yes, I do. Okay, that's my personal belief, and everybody's got a right to their opinions and beliefs. Okay, that's my belief. Okay, but the issue is not as simple. In a sense, it is, but in another sense, it's not. And I'm going to give you scenarios on that you've already alluded to, where I've talked to people. I've talked to a transgender woman and a transgender male in the hallway to state capitol on these issues to
Hmm.
get their perspective. But yeah, I think at the end of the day, we both agree that politicians suck. I don't care what side of the aisle they're on. Okay, and now
I don't
let
know.
me.
I had to help block Rod Blagojevich and Kwame Kilpatrick win their races. So I don't
Yeah,
disagree
so I
with
mean,
you.
uh, let me run something else by you before and we're going to get into some real meaty stuff that we've been kind of dancing around. Trust me, we're going to get into it. But there's one thing I do want to cover before we get into the meaty stuff. Okay, because this really did intrigue me. Here we are. We basically got a super majority in the House and Senate, right? As far as Republicans, so-called Republicans. I'll tell everybody right now that it's the swamp party is what I call it. To me, there are only less than five conservatives in that whole building. To me, the conservatives are the true minority in that building. It would go the swamp party, Democrats, and then conservatives. Okay, I mean, and,
Okay.
okay,
Unfortunately, the swamp party's in power.
yes, yes. Unfortunately for both of us. Okay, and so my question to you is, and because I did find this, and you're kind of political buff. So why do you think? I mean, this thing only passed in the House with only 60 votes.
Yeah, that's
Only
all it needed.
60. Right. Well, it just needed 51. But I mean, think about it. You got a super majority in the House. Okay. This thing hammered through the Senate. It was a slam dunk in
Well,
the Senate.
I,
But fourteen Republicans in the House voted no to this.
did you ask them why they voted no?
I've been trying to. Of course, they won't answer. They don't even like me, but I mean, they won't answer the question.
Stop
But I
hitting,
mean,
stop punching them,
I
and they
mean,
might start liking you.
I had a little bit of a theory to go. Okay, why did it not sail through the House? Why only 60 votes? Why did 14 Republicans vote no this? And I don't know if it was because they listened, which we're going to talk about the testimony in the committee in the House State Agencies Committee. I don't know if it's because they listened to the testimony in that, or or because there's not enough teeth in the law, that they have the problem
I,
that I have with it, that there's not enough teeth. And I can't
I,
answer that question. What do you think?
I have my suspicions, and and again, I don't like making assumptions, but they don't want to talk to me. Do you think they don't want to talk to you? They certainly do not want to talk with me. Um, I suspect that you're right on a couple of them. I think one of them is they don't. I think that people would prefer that the aggressor in the bathroom situation under their definition would be the person that would be challenged and would be the person that would be quote unquote punished.
Hmm.
um and I don't know, I think that for the most part, and you've pointed it out yourself, conservative theory would go against the idea of trying to sue the state when there's no recovery for the victim. The victim does not become whole. It is not made whole. This is just an obligatory way for the Republicans to say on their next campaign brochure that they stopped the transgender wave. So
I
those
agree
are
with you.
those are I'm gonna go with those two suspicions. I'm gonna say for the most part, I've not seen evidence of Republicans voting their conscience and seeing transgender people as a marginalized community.
I don't see a lot. I don't hardly see any conscience at the state capitol across the damn board. If you want to know the truth, and so
I don't
uh,
know. Check it. Watch Ashley Hudson. She's pretty good about taking care of her
well,
conscience.
there's a few. I am a I'm a big Matt Duffield fan out of Russellville.
Yeah.
I'm Brian up in Greenway. I'm a big. We don't agree on a lot, but I'm a big Clark Tucker fan. I can
Yeah.
deal with somebody who will be honest.
Yeah.
Okay, and I can work. Matter of fact, Clark and I worked on the FOIA bill hard together. I can deal with people that are honest and
Hmm.
ethical. It's when people are unethical and dishonest. I can't. I will not work with people like that. But let's get to the meat because I know you've been drooling to get to the meat. Okay,
Oh, come on, Jimmie.
and I mean, is in. So we talked about it. Is the overall issue simple? And I contend in one way, yes. Okay, in the sense, a man, woman, da da da. But then it gets complicated. It gets real complicated, as a matter of fact. And when you factor in some realities. Okay, and so now I'm going to talk about. Were you able to watch the video of the testimony?
I, I chose not to, only because I, I, having worked in this arena for so long, I don't really see many positive things coming out of the testimony. And frankly, seeing the pain and anguish on the people testifying against this bill, it's really hard to see time and time and time again.
I was there, and then I reviewed because things intrigue me. Okay, and like I'll give you an example. Uh, there was a lady there that I've since learned was a man, Evelyn Stafford. Evelyn is a justice of the peace in Washington County. You may know
She's a
Evelyn.
good friend of mine. She's a friend of
Yeah,
mine.
and I like Evelyn. I think we both testified in committee a couple times on some stuff. Seemed very sharp, very sharp.
She's an
Seemed,
amazing.
seemed to be very in control. Had no idea Evelyn was a man till Evelyn testified. Had no idea. That did not change my opinion of Evelyn one bit. Okay. But I just had no clue. And this is reading because I'm going to a point here. Now
I believe it.
there was somebody, Keon Anderson testified.
Hmm.
Okay. Keon walks up there with a full beard, ball cap, jeans. I'm sitting right behind him while he's testifying. I'm going, hey, that's a dude. That's a dude. Never entered my mind that Keon was a woman. Never even entered my mind till Keon announced it. So okay, all right. And so had a conversation with Keon in the hallway after the committee meeting, and had a good conversation with Keon. And we were talking. Had another conversation with Evelyn. Okay, and this is where we get into it's not so simple because Keon's position is because there was a women's restroom right across the hall from the committee room. And Keon's position is he said, look, he said, if I go in that bathroom, I'm going to be in trouble or, something could happen. And I said, Keon, if you hadn't have told me that you're actually a woman and you would have followed my wife in that bathroom, I'd be the guy coming dragging your ass out. And we were having a friendly conversation. I mean, because we were talking about the realities. Okay, that's reality. Jimmie
Hmm.
Cavan would have walked in there, grabbed Keon up, and out we go, right?
And that's the danger of this bill.
And so now let's go to Evelyn. Okay, when you look at Evelyn, I had no clue Evelyn was a guy. No clue whatsoever. Doesn't change my opinion of Evelyn a bit. I think, like I say, we conversed. I think Evelyn's pretty smart, and we've had really good conversations. But so now, okay, if Evelyn goes into a men's restroom, okay, now you got a problem. So if Keon goes in the men's restroom, okay, he's violating the law, but there's really not an issue. If Evelyn goes in the women's restroom, nobody knows Evelyn is a man. So, boom. When you swap that, though, it does create chaos. And I think we have to realize that. Even conservatives have to realize, okay, that can create chaos. Now, you just said something that we're going to kind of disagree on that, and that's where I asked the question: does this law endanger transgenders? Okay, you go.
Well, so the first is just the basis. Okay. Being transgender is an adjective, it's not a noun. Okay. It doesn't describe it. That is not what I am. That is a description. Now, my diagnosis, if you wanted a diagnosis, that's something totally different. But as a transgender person, right, I think that this law endangers many transgender people because it requires you to know the basis of who they are. So, like you referred to Evelyn as a man, but Evelyn does not refer to Evelyn as a man. Evelyn refers to Evelyn as a woman,
Sure, she did. Sure, yeah. And
right? So Evelyn is a woman,
to
and
Evelyn.
right, and to the world as presenting. You have said yourself that you would not have known that Evelyn was born with male sexual reproductive organs
No, I wouldn't have had a
unless
clue.
unless she had told you.
Mhm.
That's the oddity. That's what people are totally uncomfortable with is the unknown. And so because there's a discomfort, then we're going to start actually defending ourselves by defining and putting into place those things that help us exist in the world. So women will be women. You have to look like a woman, you are a woman. If you're born with male testes, you're a man. If you're born with ovaries, you're a woman. And that's going to be our define. That's how we define the world. And so now the world has to live with those definitions when the world does not live with those definitions.
The thing, this is, and I go into it like this. Okay. First of all, let me say this, and I said in the article, and I mean this sincerely. If someone wants to live their life, if someone is a man and wants to live their life as a woman, or they in their own world that they're a woman, I don't care. That's your right. Okay, knock yourself out. As long as you're not violating laws and harming people, I truly do not care. If someone is a woman and wants to live their life as a man, I truly do not care. If you're not breaking laws and harming somebody. Okay. But there's more feelings to consider than their feelings. There are other people's feelings to consider as well. And so,
Tell me more about that, Jimmie. Who else needs to be considered?
well, I would say that if my wife is in a restroom, then her feelings need to be in women's restroom. Her feelings need to be considered as well on how she feels about the issue, not just about how the man who wants to live their life as a woman feels. It's not a one-sided issue, okay? And so, but I also look at it like this: choices have consequences, okay? If I choose to drink alcohol, that comes with consequences. If I choose to smoke dope, that comes with consequences. If I choose to take opioids, if I choose to eat fatty foods, that comes with consequences. Those were
Who,
my choices.
where's the
Okay.
choice in this?
Okay. So what I'm saying is, while I like Keon and I like Evelyn, and if I can tell you this, if
Wait, get
so,
back to the choice. I want to know
no,
what.
no, I'm going to the choice. Okay.
Okay.
Uh, but I want you to know it's that it's nothing to do with hatred, because if I saw somebody bullying Keon or bullying Evelyn, I'm gonna hit them in the mouth. Okay. But here's the deal: they made a choice. They made a choice to live their life that way. Okay. And
So
choices have consequences.
time out for 1 second. I want to challenge this one piece. Okay.
All right, go for it.
So here's the piece. What is it they're choosing to do? Are they choosing to align their internal and external identity so that their internal identity will reflect their external? Or are you saying they have to choose to live in a world by somebody else's construct and live by somebody else's standards?
What I'm saying, and I want to be clear about it, if you are a woman, okay, with with a womb, a woman, okay, as defined however in the law, I think the law actually does a crazy but decent job of defining it. But if you're a biological woman, okay, and you have a womb and so on, and what defines a woman versus a man? If you're a woman and you want, but you make the choice to live as a man because maybe you say, "Hey, I feel like a man." Okay, you make that choice. Okay, I'm okay with you making that choice. Okay, but you got to understand choices come with consequences. Same way me eating fatty foods came with a consequence. You know, when I had heart surgery. Okay, same way drinking alcohol.
Wait a
And
minute, Jimmie.
let me say this. No, and before because people, let me make this point on alcohol real quick. I don't drink anymore, but nobody can drink more than me. So I'm not being holier than thou. Okay, you're not going to drink more than Jimmy Cavan drank. Trust me, I'm in the Hall of Fame on drinking. Okay, so I'm not judgmental on it. I'm just saying that that was my choice, and consequences come with.
Being transgender
So
is
it's a
not a
choice.
choice.
See, that's
It's
where we.
not a choice to be transgender. Transgender is somebody's identity. The choice is, and this is exactly as the choice is presented, depending on at what stage in your life. The choice is, do I truly live as I believe? Does my outside reflect my inside? Or do I choose to just be who I am? Now, my choice is not do I choose to be transgender? Transgender is my identity. I hold both male and female identities. I have an outward female appearance. I have an inward male identity. That's just reality. My only choice is how I present that. And I believe that I am aligned exactly as I need to be, and that there's no question that I am able to stand up and say, yes, I am transgender. And that is weird as craziness. I mean, it's just crazy. But internally, I'm very masculine, and externally, I look feminine. And that is reality. And I just choose to live like that. I do not choose to be transgender.
So you made a choice.
The only choice I made, Jimmie, was how I'm presented to the world, not whether or not I'm transgender.
Okay. So what I'm saying is these people have a choice in how they present themselves to the world.
That's correct.
So when they
But they
make
will
that choice,
always be
but when
transgender.
okay, but when they make that choice, those choices have consequences. Like Keon, I'm going
Those
to give you
choices also have great pleasure that go along with them. Those alignments actually have very wonderful outcomes as well, not
if if
just
if
consequences.
if Keon is his life is happy, if her life is happy living as a man, okay, I got no
No, but
problem.
it's important. Keon, Keon, non-binary, Keon gets to define how Keon is identified.
He can choose how he's identified. That's his choice. I agree with it. But I'm going to go back to choices have consequences. So when Gia, because I don't believe the law puts Keon in danger. Okay. When Keon chooses to present himself the way he does, okay.
Well, Keon's not choosing to be a victim. Keon is
No,
not choosing to be
I
assaulted.
didn't I
Keon's not
didn't say
choosing
didn't say he was.
to
I
be
said
embarrassed and shamed.
we I think we both agree because you even talked about it with you. He's choosing how to present himself.
Right.
Or she is. Isn't that right? We agree on that.
Keon, regardless of how you define the pronouns, Keon is choosing to present how Keon feels very comfortable.
That's right. Okay, so Keon made that choice.
Right.
Okay, so Keon, by making that choice, has to consider. Okay, because of my choice, the consequence is now I have a problem on bathroom usage as a consequence of that choice.
No, because you're forgetting a very important thing that the bill targets people who are transgender, not people who present. Okay, there's a clear definition. Now, if I am transgender, I'm transgender, right? And I am I and if I were like 30 years younger and I wasn't settled in my life and I wanted to I wanted to go through transition. I wanted to have both top and bottom surgery. At that point, I have a male chest and I have male sexual reproductive organs. Am I still a woman at that point?
Yeah, to me, yes, because
I don't
you
have
don't
any ovaries.
you don't have any ovaries, but you were born a woman. Now you can have plastic surgery all day long. You can have surgeries, but that doesn't change the reality of what sex you are. You can
Oh, it
have
absolutely changes it. Sex is a construct.
and it doesn't change the biological facts. I can have my liver taken out, but I'm
You'd
still a
be
man
liverless.
and be liverless, right? So I can have my penis cut off. I'd just be penisless.
Yeah, you still be a
It
dude because
doesn't
you'd
change
want to
it,
be a dude.
but it doesn't change the fact that I'm still a man.
So but I will say, Jimmy, that if you feminized your face, you changed your voice, you had reconstructive surgery and gave yourself great tatas, and you had bottom surgery done, and all of a sudden now you have a vagina, I would be hard pressed to call you a dude.
I would still call you dude. I'd call you a dude with commitment, though. Okay.
You'd be calling me you'd be a dude and be insulted because look at all this work that you put into it.
And yeah, and I mean it's not cheap either. And so my point on that is in this, and I know we're just different on this in the sense that it's a choice, okay? And I think we agree it's a choice, but choices do have those consequences.
I just want to be really clear. I don't think being transgender is a choice. I think being transgender is a reality. The only choice we have is the outward appearance, and that is completely up to us.
No, I'm not disagreeing with you
I just
on the
don't want you
part of it.
getting me in trouble with all of my
No,
friends
no,
who
no,
are.
no. I'm not. Oh, trust me, you're not going to get in trouble. You hold your own. Okay. So, no, I get that people in their mind feel like there's something they're not. Okay. I get
No,
that.
no, they are. When they feel that way, they are. It's not
No,
something they're
and see,
not.
that's where we disagree.
That is true.
That's where we disagree. Okay. But I'm gonna
That's
use.
exactly where we disagree.
I'm gonna to give you, but I want to get back to the Georges. Okay. Okay. So Keon, Evelyn believes Evelyn is a woman. Okay. Keon believes Keon is a man. Okay. As I
Evelyn
tell
is a woman.
yeah,
Keon is as Keon identifies.
and so I'm like I say, I'm good with that. Uh, as long as it doesn't cross over to where
Thank
it's
God they don't need
subject.
your permission.
Yeah. Well, no, no, I don't. I didn't. Not trying to give him permission. I
No,
never
you're
ask
not.
anybody's permission. And uh, but I also go back to there are other people to consider besides Keon and Evelyn. What about the rest of the world who's uncomfortable with them being in there? What
They're
about the
going to have
rest
to
of the
get
world?
comfortable.
Well, no,
It's
they don't
not
have to. Why? Why
it's
should
not up
they?
to
Why should
me.
they have to accommodate? Why should they have to accommodate?
Is it accommodation to feel comfort, to understand somebody else and to see somebody else as they truly are? Do you think that's accommodation?
No, I'm saying why. Well, I'm going to bring accommodation in there because that's one of the problems that Evelyn and Keon had with the bill. Because in Act 317, if you remember 2023 legislature, okay, the
Yep.
so-called bathroom bills, actually, this bill was passed for public school. The difference was, and this is where Keon and Evelyn had a problem with this bill. Okay. The difference was in the public school, there are accommodations that are put into law. Okay. Accommodations. So that if you're a girl that feels like you're a man, okay, then they will provide you accommodations to go to, and not just to that person,
If
but anybody to
if
go
you
to a
have a gender dysphoria, if you have a doctor who says this person has gender dysphoria, that's when accommodations come in.
well, actually, with the law, the accommodations can come in for anybody. Okay, not just gender dysphoria at all. If anybody, matter of fact, the law
Well,
reads
it's a
it.
definite, it's, not, I agree with you, but I'm saying in this particular instance, in the bathroom issue, and when somebody is transgender and they're diagnosed, the diagnosis that the doctor gives them is gender dysphoria.
Okay, right. I agree with that. But the law says that anybody in public school doesn't matter. It's not just to transgender. Doesn't matter if you're not comfortable going in the men's restroom. You're not comfortable going in the women's restroom. You will be provided a private. There's a private facility you can go in. Same way on trips, overnight stays, and locker rooms. Okay, but that applies to everybody, which is what I liked about the law. Okay, which is what I liked about the law. And so also in that law, there's actually teeth in it, because if a superintendent, a principal, or a teacher is found by the Professional Licensure Standard Board to have violated that law, then they personally can be fined $1,000. Now, good luck getting PLSB to do that. But I mean, there is teeth in the law in that, which there's nothing here. But Keon and Evelyn's problem was that, look, this law has zero accommodation, okay? And it doesn't. It doesn't. My question is, okay, why should the taxpayers fund this accommodation? Why should Jimmie Cavan have to pay accommodation for their choice?
Look, I'm going to play devil's advocate here for 5 seconds. And I think part of the issue is that when it comes to schools, right, when it comes to students in a congregate setting, where you require students to be in that congregate setting from 8 in the morning until they're dismissed at 4 o'clock or whatever, there's a time limit that they are required to be there. We can't just say you'll have to go use the bathroom someplace else. We have to actually put accommodations in place that actually allow them to have privacy and their own consideration. I would, as devil's advocate on this, and as a
No,
person who pays,
that applies to Act 317. That's to the public school law.
that's correct. That's the public school law. That's what I'm talking about. This law does not. This law may apply to universities, state buildings, state offices, but I would say that an elected official looking at this who thought, hey, whatever, this bill's good, bad, or indifferent, would think to themselves, you don't have to be here to use this restroom. We don't have to make that accommodation available to you. We're going to make this, we're going to put a law and a constraint around this, put some definitions in place, and then be able to say, we address the bathroom issue.
No, I agree. And is from my perspective, is when people hit me, okay, well, the law should have had accommodations. My going back is saying, why should I pay for those accommodations for somebody's choice?
I think this law is stupid because it doesn't do what it's supposed to do. People just need to be able to use the bathroom that they feel comfortable using and wash their hands when they're done. That's it.
I agree. I agree that we both agree the law is stupid. We just think it's stupid for different reasons. I think
whatever. I don't care. It's a stupid bill.
And I think, but going back to it, I think if somebody wants to live their life that way, then again, it comes with consequences, and they need to take the initiative to deal with those consequences. So I'll give you an example.
Stop.
No,
Stop. Because what I'm hearing you say, let me tell you what I think I just heard you say. Okay. And put it into terms where I can actually understand it. Because if I heard you say what you just said, and I got what you were trying to say, I'd like to do some correction. But so if what you're saying is our actions that we take should be taken in consideration the consequences, and I should know I'm going to get either arrested or beat up if I look that there's a high possibility of that happening if I look like this. Did I get that right?
Semi. Let me finish with my example, okay? Let me give you an example, okay? If I'm a white guy, if I walk, yeah, you couldn't tell okay, all right. So should I be safe to walk down the projects of 12th Street in Little Rock? Well, yeah, I should, but I know if that's going to be a little comfort to me when I say, hey, I should be safe. So I'm just going to go walk down there. And when I end up in the hospital or dead, okay, I got to have better sense than that. Okay,
Jimmie, so I've ridden my scooter down 12th Street at 1:30 in the morning, coming home from playing poker. I mean,
you didn't.
I did that.
You didn't ride them through the projects. You may have.
Yeah, I did.
All right. Well, I want to see that. And but my point is, there's an element you put yourself in danger by doing that. Okay, so if Keon walks in that women's bathroom, he knowingly putting himself in a spot. So my thing is this, okay, if you're going to make a choice to live your life that way, then you got to be smart enough to go, okay, all right, here's this law. Even though nothing's going to happen to me, if I follow the law, it can put me potentially in jeopardy. Okay. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to be smart. Since I make a choice to live this way, I'm going to know the buildings I'm going into. Maybe I'm going to call ahead if I don't know the building. Say, hey, I'm going to be doing business over there today. Are there any single stall restrooms? I'm a transgender male. I'm a transgender female. Are there any single facility restrooms over there? And if they are, what floor are they on? So I know before I get there. And that should be on you because you
Jimmie,
made that
come on.
choice.
You have sat here and you have said that we need to take in consideration the fact that if we were to truly live our life as we see ourselves, we need to take in consideration the fact that we will be victims and that people will be targeting us to a certain extent. And you just said that I need to pick up the phone and call people. How safe do you think I'm going to feel picking up the phone to call somebody and say, hey, by the way, I'm coming to your building. Will I be able to use the bathroom without any difficulty? I'm
No,
not.
no, I'm not saying ask them that. I'm saying, know the building, know if there's single private bathrooms, know your
Look,
surroundings before you go into them. Okay,
the impact
that
of
would be
this,
situational awareness, and
well,
which
let me
would be
tell you about situational awareness in
yeah.
the gay and lesbian community.
No,
I
no,
am
no.
less concerned about where I use the bathroom and more concerned about who might or might not want to, you know, end me and take me off of this world just
Well,
because I'm gay or
but you're
lesbian.
not Keon though. Okay.
No, I'm not.
Okay, now hang with me here for a minute because you even said earlier, okay, while you identify as a male internally, externally you present yourself mostly as a woman. Okay, we know
Kind of
that
a butch woman. Yeah.
because I we know that because I remember when Terry Hart was running for mayor, he told you had very pretty eyes. Remember that? And so, and
Get it
uh,
all the time.
yeah. So, and so my point on that is you're not Keon. Keon has a full beard.
I know who
Keon,
Keon is.
okay, all right. So Keon's in a different situation than yours, okay? Because Keon, if he follows the law, he's got to go in that women's bathroom, okay? Which he made a choice to look the way he does. So would it not be prudent on Keon's part to say, hey, I need to know if I'm going in these buildings to avoid potential problems, to avoid potential danger. Uh, do I need to know the building, know if there's single private restrooms, what floor they're on, so that if I need to use the restroom, I can use those, or I can make
Yeah,
plans
look,
on my business there.
absolutely, absolutely. In a perfect world, Keon would know those things. But let me ask you this question, Jimmie, and this just goes back to the real root of this whole thing, is that you don't have to do that. And I don't have to do that. And Keon pays the same amount of tax dollars that I do that help run the state, the community, and yet we culturally think that Keon is bringing this all on Keon's self because of the way Keon presents. And that, I think, is the crux of the whole issue. I believe that the Constitution gives Keon the right to present however Keon wants, and that it's on us to let Keon live their life and have the same guarantees that everyone else does.
And
Period.
and what you said was pretty interesting, okay? Because when you said you or I don't I don't have to make those calls. I don't have to call ahead because I don't face that same problem. It's because I choose to live my life as a man, which is what I am. Okay, it goes back to the choice. Keon made that choice to present himself as something he is not. Okay, that's his
Because
right.
Keon wants to be happy,
And
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 Keon is defined in his own identity in
and
that
I
way.
and I support Keon's constitutional right to present himself that way. Okay, I'll fight people over his right to do that. But at the same time, that was his choice. So, so why should we make Keon comfortable for a choice he made,
What do you have to
and
do
make
to make Keon
where
comfortable?
other people are uncomfortable? Okay, other people are uncomfortable who choose to live their life as they were born, as a woman or man. So if they
You know,
go in the bathroom, and so why should Keon's comfort weigh more than their comfort?
so it's an interesting question, and I'll answer it by just talking about my discomfort and how I became comfortable. Okay. Growing up in Arkansas, I never saw a transgender person growing up. I never thought to myself, anything about being, I thought it was just weird. I never understood it, not even for 5 seconds. It wasn't until I lived in Seattle in the late 90s where I met somebody who is transgender. And that person, that person was straight up amazing. But I could not even find myself enough time to sit with them for 5 minutes because of the discomfort I felt by not understanding who they were and about how you can be just like you can be a man, but then see yourself as a woman. And I couldn't bring that together. It's taken a lot of introspection and a lot of thought and a lot of identity to understand that I was really running away from myself because I spent so much time afraid of people finding out who I was that I hated myself. I hated not looking and being accepted by everybody else. I hated being weird. I hated not having the same feelings that my sister had, that I acted like the same way. I isolated so much and ran away so far because I was afraid of who I was, not not because of anybody else. So learning who Janice is helped me understand who I am. And it's not a question of why should one person be uncomfortable when the other person isn't. It's a question of understanding where that discomfort comes from. Does the discomfort come from, I don't understand this other person, or discomfort come from this person is threatening me? And if this person is threatening you, that's one thing. But if your discomfort is based on the fact that you don't understand something, that's another thing altogether.
All right, now you're a little bit different than most, but I can tell you that in most
Jimmie,
women,
let's just stop there.
no, you're a little bit. What I'm saying is you're kind of you were maybe not raised in the country, but you were raised in Jonesboro back in the day when Jonesboro wasn't that big and everything. So well, there's a
It's pretty
country
country.
aspect there. Yeah, country. I was raised 8 miles down a dirt road, and I'm just gonna say
Yeah, I mean,
country.
it was a dirt road.
Country people are tougher than city people. I'll just say it, okay? And so if you're in a women's bathroom and a guy who either looks like a guy or is a guy walks in there that's pretty manly, bearded, big shoulders, big arms,
Hmm.
okay, you may not feel uncomfortable,
No, no. Well, no. The
but
first question out of my mouth is going to be, "What the hell are you doing?"
most women are gonna go, holy shit.
I'm not.
They're gonna be
The
scared.
first question out of my mouth is, "What are you doing in here? Are you trying to
Okay,
fix something?"
but that's you. Okay, there are women that will immediately feel a lot of fear.
Yeah.
Okay, and so why should they have to? Why should they have to go through that fear? Why should they have to sacrifice their personal feelings of well-being and their personal feelings of safety? Why should they have to sacrifice that?
But we're not talking about a man walking into the bathroom. We're talking about a person who would like to be identified as a woman who may have more manly presentation because they have an Adam's apple or because their chin is pronounced, or they may even have some poorly taken care of facial hair. I
But
you and I
do you
have
believe
seen
Keon is a man?
this. Do what?
Do you believe Keon is a man?
I, I personally, I'm the only hesitancy I have is that I don't know if Keon identifies as non-binary or if Keon identifies as a man?
Keon identifies as a man. I had
Well,
discussion.
then Keon is a man.
Okay, perfect to a point. I mean, but I'm just going to tell you, and he's very open. We had a great discussion. He's had all the hormonal treatments. He's done
Yeah,
this. I mean,
I've just never asked Keon how they identify.
yeah, and it's been a process for Keon. It's been a process. Okay.
Yeah.
It's not a short process. It did, from my understanding, doing a little research, you just don't go from one day boom to the next day have a beer.
No, Jimmie. No, you
And
have to live in the identity for 2 years before you can begin to
right.
physically transition.
Okay. So you believe Keon's a man. So if Keon walks in that bathroom, from your perspective, he's a man.
Yeah.
Okay.
And from my perspective, I'd
Okay.
be
So
like, yeah, well, what's going on?
okay, but from a non-woman's perspective, a man just walked in here and I feel in danger and I feel scared. Okay. That's a real
Right.
feeling to them.
Yeah.
So why should they have to sacrifice to
They
put up with
shouldn't.
those feelings?
No,
That's my
Jimmie.
point.
I think this law is stupid. I think Keon should be able to use the man's restroom if Keon wants to use the men's restroom.
You know,
I think if Keon, I think if Keon wants to use the family restroom, Keon should be using the family restroom wherever
yeah,
Keon can feel safe.
I go back, and I know we're never going to agree on that point, but I think the discussion is really good to look at perspective from people's different perspectives, right? And here's what I feel is a solution, not just for transgenders, but for privacy. Okay.
Jimmie,
Now
please,
that
if I do anything, please stop saying transgenders.
okay,
It's
well,
like
transgender,
saying
whatever you want to call
talls.
it. Okay, whatever you want to call it.
Transgender people. Just
Transgender
transgender is
people.
an
If
adjective.
that
It's
makes
not
you
a
more
noun.
comfortable, I'll say transgender people. Okay.
Perfect. Thank you very
Okay.
much.
And but here's my thing, because I don't want to just apply this to transgender people. I want to apply this to everybody
Yeah.
about privacy. About privacy. Okay. And so I want to apply it to me, to you, to everybody. I think a step to go is to going forward would be a couple of things. And I want to get your thoughts on this. That maybe we get in the next legislative session a state law or propose it. I don't know that the swamp party would ever approve this. Uh, to say, okay, on all state buildings, let's start with state. On all state buildings going forward, new construction on state buildings, instead of having multi-use restrooms, we're going to have private use restrooms where you go in there and it's just you. Okay. I think that's better for privacy for everybody. Hey, I'm a dude, right? Okay. I really don't enjoy having a bowel movement with 12 other people in the same restroom with me. Okay.
Who
I'm not trying to
does?
be graphic. I'm not trying to be graphic, but I like a little privacy myself.
I'd
And
prefer to poop at home, but if you're going to be
yeah,
out and it hits you, you
yeah.
gotta.
And so I think privacy for everybody. Privacy for a mother or father who needs to change a diaper. Privacy if a mother breastfeeds, something like that. A little privacy, right? So I think a solution may be going not to just for problems, the issue of transgender people or people that abuse saying that, hey, I'm really not a transgender person, but I'm going to use that as an excuse so I can go in the ladies' restroom. Okay. And there are people few and far between that do that. So how about we do that? Now, let me get your take on that and this. Okay. Now, as far as going backwards, the problem is they go, okay, well, can we not retrofit buildings we have now? Well, the problem you have there is the cost involved with it in doing that, especially in like I'll give you an example, Lonoke County Courthouse, Craigin County Courthouse, where you
So,
come.
so I don't disagree with what you're saying. Personal use, absolutely. Turn that knob. It works at Buc-ee's. It works at, make every bathroom as nice as the Buc-ee's bathroom. That's my philosophy, right? So that totally works. Here's my question though. We didn't start hearing about bathroom bills until probably 2011, 2012. I want to know, how did we keep the onslaught of transgender people from using the bathroom before 2012? And where are all the examples of the need for this issue to be talked about? I
Right.
mean,
I'll answer that question because when it happened up here in Conway, because actually the Conway School Board, the bill in 2023 that went statewide for public school is actually the same language that the Conway School Board instituted before that
Before
legislative
they were
session.
dismantled and thrown out of office.
And okay, no, I'm just talking about the reality.
No, I know.
The school board wrote that law.
I
What
know,
Mary
but
Bentley did is
like,
took that law
show
and
me
took
the
it.
evidence of the need for this
Well,
law.
that's where I'm going with this, okay? Because you talked about when it came about, and that's when it started coming about. And I think what it is looking proactive and seeing down the road where things are going the same way. And we're going to have a different show on athletics, okay? But a lot of that stuff is coming to fruition now. And so I think the idea behind it was to be proactive and tackle something
Yeah.
before it gets to a point. That's where I'm saying. I'm not saying there was evidence of issues with that. I don't see a lot of there's not a lot of evidence of issues with it right now. I'm saying that it's proactive. Now,
Yeah. And
you may disagree with that, but that's
I just think it's silly, and I'm tired of being used as fundraising fodder for the religious right.
I agree with you on that. I mean, you get used as fundraising. It's because they think people like me are stupid, and I'm not stupid. And I call them out on it. But hey, we're going to get out of here. But before we do, I want to make sure that you've got every point that you want to make. So, what else? Is there anything else you want to add to this or anything like
So,
that?
Jimmie, I appreciate the conversation. We're gonna come from different perspectives, but the interesting thing is that we need the messengers. We need people to actually talk about this issue. We need people to understand the impact of these laws, or and the fact that it's not just it's an opportunity for people to express their opinions, but it also has real impact on people's lives in this state.
Sure.
And I think that that we should talk about that as often as possible too.
Yeah, I think it's been a good discussion, and we both knew coming into it that we're going to have some disagreements, but I think we also saw some things that potentially we do agree on, maybe from different aspects coming
And
toward it.
and that's the important thing, right? Is that we have the conversation so that I learned something from you, you learned something from me, and
Yeah,
that's an
yeah,
actual exchange of ideas. And
yeah.
that is, I yearn for that. I yearn for more of that.
Yeah, I think these type of discussions are good and everything. So listen, you don't know how much I appreciate you doing it because I know it's not easy. Sometimes it's not an easy subject to talk about at
Oh,
all.
I can't wait for the day when you and I get into a screaming match about some of this stuff.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, well, we know it's coming, right? So, and
I
yeah,
just
we're
know how to
gonna do this
dodge.
again, and I think we will take it from a next time. Let's talk about the athletes, women's sports versus men's sports, and
Hey,
the Title IX, and
let's talk about this too. I mean, let's talk about the fact that it cost me $5,000 in a year-long process to adopt my child, whose umbilical cord I cut, and whose life I helped create. But I had to go through a $5,000 process of adopting her, whereas most people don't have to go through that if they're in a marriage with their spouse.
yeah, I think that's a good discussion to have and talk about adoption laws and stuff like that. Yeah, I think there's all kind of good discussions to have, and so
It's all about sharing information, right?
yeah, yeah, and so I think it was great. Listen, you don't know how much I appreciate you willing to come on. It's hard to find, and I'm sure you find this too. It's hard to find somebody from a totally opposite end of the spectrum, as you said earlier, that will kind of have the guts for two people to find the guts to talk to each other, right?
Hey,
And
it's easy to hate your guts, Jimmie. It's easy
yeah,
to hate your
yeah,
guts.
I just think people too often just go with their corners. And instead of actually getting out there and having it out in a civil
Yeah,
way. So I appreciate that a lot. So all right, we're gonna do this again. Sound good to you, Scanlon?
sounds good to me, Jimmie.
All right, let me hit this button. Hey, thanks a bunch. I appreciate it.
You bet.